This session is Tech for Good, getting to grips with the AI session. Unfortunately, Dan Such, our guru, has had to pull out of the summit at short notice due to a family emergency. He's genuinely gutted not to be here today, but he has sent over a video, which I understand is going to play now, and then we are going to have a couple of lightning talks from two amazing speakers, Sarah Watson, who's the Head of Innovation at the National Lottery Community Fund, and Sarah Smith, who is the Innovation Programme Lead at the Lucy Faithfull Foundation. But first of all, let's hear from Dan, who's going to set the context.
Hello, everybody. I'm so very sorry that I'm not with you today. Partly because last year this was one of my favourite events, not just for the things I heard from the speakers, but the people I met and the conversations I had in the breaks and the breakout sessions. So I hope you've had an amazing day so far. I really am very sorry that I'm not with you. Partly also because you're about to hear from Sarah and Sarah, who are utterly amazing. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope if there are any questions or further conversations, that we can pick it up in LinkedIn community or via email. But I'm Dan. I lead a charity called CAST that was set up 10 years ago to help build the capacity of the VCSE sector in how we use and respond to the use of digital and, of course, AI. So let's talk about that today, because responding to how AI is kind of being adopted and being used and how we might use it in the sector is very, very important for the conversation about the future of social impact that we've been discussing today. So let me share some thoughts and hopefully prompt a conversation that you can take on for the rest of the day. So getting grips with AI. So the first is, let's think about how people are using AI across the sector. The screen in front of you shows that in our last survey, 51% of charities already using AI in their operations, 17% planning to do so. So beginning to kind of see a growth there. Most commonly using ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, Canva, Magic Studio. What's interesting is fewer organizations have a policy or formal process in place compared to the number of people that are using AI. That also means that fewer organizations are providing support and training than there are organizations that are using AI. So we're seeing more adoption by individuals, slower adoption by organizations. It's worth noting, though, that if we looked at the Neighbourly survey, which surveys very small organizations, they would say that fewer than 20% of charities are using AI. The Digital Skills Report say that 76% of charities are using AI. I think what that tells us is we don't have brilliant data across the whole sector. We have good pockets of data, but all they point to is this growing use of AI, growing adoption, more in larger organizations than in smaller organizations. And when we look at how people are using these tools, then we know that they're using it to create documents and reports, do admin tasks, to develop online content, interestingly, to use as a coach to help you generate ideas and problem solve, to start doing research and information gathering. And then within organizational uses, we're seeing admin and project management, grant fundraising, comms, and evaluation. So across lots of different elements of charity practice or VCSE practice, we're seeing beginnings of use of AI, particularly generative AI. But to make sense of that and think about what this means for the future of social impact, I'd love to give us a thinking frame about the impact of technology on society. So in 2005, Stephen Chen, one of the co-founders of YouTube, was asked by their investor, is this any good? Has this got any legs? Shall I put more money into it? And his response was, I don't know, man, there's just not that many videos I want to watch. Now, in 2005, YouTube was a platform where if you had a video, you could upload it to share it with other people. And in that context, there are only so many videos I want to watch. But of course, with that technology, people started to create videos specifically to share with other people. And that meant that people started to like the things that were being shared and started to kind of form groups around them and follow those content creators. And that led to content creators, to YouTubers, to influencers. It led to a shift in how people search for and find information and content to engage with. YouTube is now the second most popular search engine. We've got to the point now where 95% of young people are more likely to go online to YouTube to find content to watch than they are to watch mainstream television. So we've seen a shift in content creation, seen a shift in the economics around digital content creation and digital media, a shift away from those mainstream television channels. We've seen a shift in how people are looking for information, We've also seen a shift in our expectations, that now we expect for free to find a high quality video that describes how to mend curtains, to change a plug, to sort out the problem with the car. We just expect those things to be there for free. So we've seen a shift over that time in people's behaviours, a shift in people's expectations, and of course, we've seen a shift in people's needs. In 2005, we weren't that worried about the impact of social media on young people's mental health, for example, or the impact on sources of truth and information. And yet we're worrying about that now. And the reason for sharing this is what we see is over time, the dominant model of technology brings about new needs, new behaviours, and new expectations. YouTube and social media have done that for the last 20 years or so, where our expectations, our needs, our behaviours have changed because of these new tools. Now, what's that got to do with AI, and why are we talking about it? Well, it's because generative AI is the fastest growing adoption of a commercial technology we've ever seen. The graph in front of you shows that the mobile phone took about 14 years to get to the stage where it had 100 million users. The internet took 7 years to get to that stage, Facebook 4.5 years, but ChatGPT took just 3 months to get to the stage where it had 100 million users. And today it's 700 million weekly users. This really rapid adoption of these tools. Now, there's a few reasons for that rapid adoption. The first is that it's a general purpose technology, which means you can use it across lots of different domains. You can use it to create picture books for your kids at home, to create an essay at school, to do some homework, to do something at work, create pictures of cute cats. You can use it across lots of different areas. The second is it's a consumer technology. You can now access these very powerful tools if you have a browser. You have incredibly powerful tools if you have $20 a month. So it means that many people now have access to these tools. Now, if you look back at these, you might say, well, but mobile phones were really expensive. That's a very expensive technology. And we had to wait to get to that adoption for people to be able to afford it or for the price to come down. That's true. Generative AI is also a very expensive technology, but the business model has changed. The business model says, let's go for adoption and then figure out how we generate revenue later. Microsoft spends $13 billion a quarter on keeping Copilot alive, just focused on the adoption, the small numbers of $20 a month kind of licenses, and then figuring out the bigger way of generating back the revenue and the income. So lots and lots of uses across lots of different domains. And one of the things that helps us make sense of all these different kind of changes going on is to use what we call the spheres of influence, or what one of the Sarahs will call Dan's egg, from how it was first displayed. But what we're seeing across the sector and beyond is, starting in the bottom left, people exploring how they can use AI within their existing workflows to become more efficient. So how can you streamline and find greater efficiencies within your existing ways of working by using AI tools? We host 2 large peer networks, one called the Digital Leads Network that is 400 people from charities across the UK, one the AI for Grant Makers, which is 400 people from grant making organisations across the UK. Lots of examples and conversations take place at that stage. How can we use these tools to become more efficient? And a really clear example of those using AI, 60% of charities said they're using it to help write grant applications. So they're taking a 3-day process and making it a 30-minute process. They can write applications far more quickly, become more streamlined. The impact of that, of course, is that grant makers are seeing a huge increase in the volume of applications they're receiving. And so some are beginning to look at how they can use AI for due diligence or to make sense of the applications they're receiving. So how can we become more efficient with our existing ways of working? The second sphere in purple there is saying, how else might we achieve our objectives using these modern tools and find new processes to get there? So building on that grant application example, if AI is being used to write applications and AI is being used to mark its own homework, perhaps that's not the best way of allocating precious resources to communities and organisations. So how else can we identify, discover, connect with the best placed people and teams to provide support? How can we find new ways of achieving that by using these modern tools? There's another layer or sphere that I want to think about today, which is this context change, this outer orange layer, which is how AI is influencing kind of broader social change, how it's impacting the labour market, how it's impacting who has power, how it's impacting the way in which businesses work, governments work, impacting how we can access information and support. Now, the reason to think about that context change is as we add those three things together, becoming more efficient, finding new ways of achieving our objectives, and the changing world in which we're operating, they all come colliding together to challenge us to think about how does this change our mission? How does it change what we're trying to achieve? How does it change the definitions within our mission or our approaches? And for a group like this today, that's kind of the level of the conversation we need to be thinking about is what does this mean for the context in which we're operating if we're going to really consider and influence the future of social impact? If I was talking to any other group, I would now start saying, let's share some examples of what's going on across the sector. Let's think about your own use. But for this group today, there's a more important strategic question that I would love you to ask. So regardless of your adoption, whether you're using AI or not, regardless of how you feel about AI, what does it mean if other people are using AI? What does that mean for your mission, your work, your team, and your role? This then becomes a significant strategic question for all of us if we're looking to bring about a hopeful, positive future around social impact. What do other people's use of AI mean for how we should act and respond? Let me give you some examples and sort of reasons why. So the first is 700 million people are using this, 1/10 of the world population, adult population, 2.5 billion messages being sent every day. This number has increased by 5 times in the last year. We're seeing fastest growth in low and middle income countries. And now the gender gap between users is pretty much even. Whereas when ChatGPT first launched, it was mostly used by men. So we're seeing this huge explosive growth of use. And interestingly, 3/4 of use is outside of the work context. So the sorts of things that people are engaging at home with their communities, with their families, where they're looking for support and help, that's where they're using it more than within their work. And I'm guessing that very often that's kind of how they engage within the work that we do. Really specifically, when we look at how ChatGPT is being used, we're mostly using it for looking for practical guidance, tutoring and how-to advice, looking to write and create things, and then looking for information and support. Again, I would imagine that that's possibly kind of the 3 starting points that many people start with to come to where you are and the work that you're doing and the support that you're offering. Now, if they're using AI in their kind of patterns of behavior in their workflows, before they come to you or as they find you, how does that mean we need to respond? What are the changes we need to sense and respond to? Well, let me give you some examples of some of the implications of these changing behaviors. Since the launch of ChatGPT, worldwide search traffic has fallen by 15%. That means that 15% has shifted to people using AI to ask those questions rather than going through search engines. Since the launch of the AI summaries in Google, you might have noticed that as you go to Google, put in your question or your search, and you get a summary before you get all the links. That AI written summary, since that was launched, the number of people who no longer click through to one of those links has gone up by 56%. So that means people are now looking at those summaries and accepting that as the response rather than clicking through to the website where some of that response has been generated from. So we're seeing this shift in how people are looking for information and how they're seeking and where they're stopping in that information journey. Now, these stats come from research from SimilarWeb looking at news sites. So there, people are looking for the news. They're often stopping with that summary and not then clicking through to the news site that has the independent journalists or the kind of the more detailed information. Of course, it also breaks the link through to that site where you see the adverts that are paying for that independent journalism. So it's beginning to break that business model and that information flow. So what does that mean for the sorts of work if people's behavior around seeking information is changing? Well, in our sector, we actually have a survey that's out at the moment trying to kind of collect more information about the impact of this across the sector. And a couple that have been shared because of that. The one in the top right is an organisation that has seen 60,000 fewer monthly visitors, sorry, page views per month since the launch of those summaries. So many fewer people are then finding their way to that website. They would argue that they have better engagement with those who do find their websites. You can still see a really significant disruption in people's information seeking behaviours. What does it mean for the quality of the information you're trying to share? What does it mean for how people are finding the support and insight and advice that you have? And of course, does that relate to a business model where people are then finding support us, donate now, or some other way of partnering with you? how if other people are shifting their information seeking behaviors, what does it mean for you? Or we might say, yes, but we're really trusted. That's one of the things we bring as a as civil society. But in the global dialogues and human AI relationships research, they found that 58% of participants said they trust their chatbots are acting in their best interests, compared to even 28% for elected officials. Now, there was no amounts ascribed to charities or civil society organisations. But what we see here is people are very distrustful of the organisations that own and run these tools, but they're quite trustful of the outputs of these tools. So there's a shift in information seeking behaviour. There's a shift in trust about information too. And of course, if people are using this within the workplace, then what we're seeing already is a shift in the labour market. So Adzuna recently published, Adzuna is a platform for advertising job roles. They saw a drop of 32% in entry-level roles. That's because people are using things like ChatGPT to do that first piece of research, that market scan, the first draft of something, the to bring in some more information about a new product, look at competitors, all the kind of things that you might ask an entry-level role to do, including things like the first prototype, the first design work, are now being shifted to AI. Again, what does that mean if that's changing in the labour market? Not just if your work is about supporting people to develop skills or to access employment. What does it mean for your own recruitment? What does it mean for your kind of talent pathways to make sure you have brilliant people leading the organisation in the future? Mary Meeker published a 300-page report at the end of last year, where she used the term unprecedented 51 times, and she talked about the impact of generative AI. But at the heart of it, she's saying AI is foundationally changing the way we work. People are becoming more familiar with working with and alongside these machines. We're using AI to take some of these skills. It's often called a skill displacement technology. And as we assemble skills into roles, so we're seeing shifts in the labour market. The ramifications are widespread. And you might think then, yeah, we get that, we get the kind of the trust bit, but what we really do is we hold great relationships with our community. And that's true. But it's worth noting that over 150 million young people are using My AI in Snapchat, which is an always-on, ever-present, always untiring, positive AI companion that can support the young people to find out what they should give their best friend for breakfast for their birthday, how they can plan their week ahead, how they can get support if they're feeling low, how they can kind of think about their homework, how they can connect with other people. We're shifting some of these relationships with and through technology. And that can be great, this hyper-personalization. But what does it mean then for how they then engage with their parents, with their teachers, with their community? But it's beginning to see a shift in our relationships with and through technology, shift in how we're seeking information, a shift in trust, and a shift in relationships. For me, this comes down to this incredible quote from Professor Donald Clark, who's an entrepreneur, investor, and academic at Brighton University. He says, generative AI changes our very relationship with knowledge. If you want to find a comparison in history, it's the invention of the alphabet and the printing press. So when we talk about AI, we think about how we might use it. It's not just a faster calculator or a better computer. It's something that's changing our relationship with knowledge. Now, if you think back to what we know of the invention of the printing press, we know that it opened up huge numbers of people to share information and knowledge in new ways. It led to literacy across the globe. But it also led to a shift in power. It led to civic unrest, civil and international war. It led to a new religion, or many new religions. It led to the dissolution of the monasteries. Really significant change where the dominant model of technology brings about a behavior and needs and expectations around shifts in knowledge, shifts in power. Now, if we're thinking about the future of social impact, and I think about the impact of AI on that, we need to think what happens and how do we ensure we work together to respond to these changes in people's behaviours and needs, and how do we work together to ensure we're influencing the future of AI to align it with our ambitions around the positive future of social impact. There's a wonderful quote from Ethan Mollick that says that getting to know AI requires 3 sleepless nights. A night where you're really concerned about AI, a night where you're really excited about the possibility, and a night where you begin to kind of make sense of it all. I think I'm on about 200 sleepless nights at the moment, And I hope after today, you have some sleepless nights too. But I hope it also draws you to work together to think about how do we respond if other people are using AI to ensure we bring about the positive future of social impact. Now, I'm going to pause there. I'm going to leave you to listen to two amazing speakers who are thinking of and acting on how to respond to the use of AI and how they're using it within their own organizations. So thank you for your time today. I'm really sorry that I'm not with you. I very much look forward to catching up with you either on LinkedIn or email or somewhere else. Thanks so much.
What an insightful, absolutely. Absolutely. And we can connect with Dan on LinkedIn, and I think we have a LinkedIn community at Trust Impact if you've got questions directly for him. But AI is clearly changing not how we work, but also how we behave. And we're going to hear much more about that from our next speakers. First of all, I'm going to ask Sarah Smith, who's the Innovation Programme Lead at the Lucy Faithfull Foundation. Now, Sarah is going to be talking about how they've made efforts to respond to new behaviours of people using AI to create and share child sexual abuse material, so I'm flagging that. And she'll be talking about really how you partner with AI companies, building the in-house capabilities and testing and iterating chatbot tools. Then we're going to have a lightning talk from Sarah Watson, and then we're going to take your questions. So Sarah, big introduction and a big thank you.
Hello, everyone. Well, how do you follow Dan? He's always a difficult act to follow. So I'm Sarah Smith. I am Innovation Programme Lead at Lucy Faithfull Foundation. And as Sharon said, our mission, our work is based around preventing child sexual abuse. Now, I do two things in the organisation. One sort of internal facing, so I try and embed innovation within Lucy Faithfull, and AI falls into that. So I lead the AI working group. So we've been meeting for 18 months talking about developing policies, how we sort of embed responsible, ethical AI use within LFF. But then my other part of the work that I do is leading a tech project. So I work with tech companies across the whole online sector to promote and develop the use of warning messages against people who are trying to create, access, share indecent images of children. I'm going to use the acronym CSAM. I don't know if you're all familiar with that, but that's child sexual abuse material. So that's what I mean when I say CSAM. Now, the Lucy Faithfull Foundation, we have 35 years in working with people who are at risk of offending or people who have offended. So we have 35 years of experience understanding motivations, behaviour, how people are sort of offending, what their pathways are. And my particular project, Project Intercept, has been set up in response to the huge rise of sort of the availability of CSAM online, the rise in grooming, and we all see the headlines, we see how this is increasing every year. And so in the past 18 months, we've made a decision to pivot our work towards focusing on partnering with AI companies, and that's simply because of that risk horizon, the threats that we see coming through. So as a quick snapshot, our calls to our helpline, which we run the Stop It Now helpline, which is available for anyone who has concerns about child sexual abuse. They have risen 225% in the last year, just about calls around AI-generated CSAM. So that is people using AI to create sexual images and videos of children. Our helpline takes around 20,000 calls, chats and emails every single year, and about half of those are from people concerned about their own behaviour. So we're very much focused on people who are struggling with their thoughts or behaviour around children. So that's a bit of background setting. Now, this pivot that I mentioned, this pivot to working with AI companies, this came about simply because of the understanding that people's behaviour was changing, and so our response had to change quite rapidly. We were seeing this increase of harms being caused online around AI, and so we decided that our big focus was going to be on AI companies. Unfortunately, I'm under NDA, so I can't talk about the particular AI companies, but I can say we're actively working with 8 of them. They're a range from the sort of LLM providers, so looking at the kind of chatbots that you might use in your everyday work, through to much more niche organizations, business-to-business organizations that are using AI. And what we try to do is sit down with them, look at user journeys, and figure out where can we insert some warning message, some interventions along the way to get to that person as soon as they start to input material or use prompts that are starting to suggest they're looking to create or access or do other illegal things around AI CSAM. And I should add, this is also around grooming as well, not just around CSAM. So what we're finding is that this pivot, we found that these AI companies are actually refreshingly easy to work with, and I think this is because this is such a new part of the online sector. Some of the older, more established areas such as search engines and social media, which we also work with, sometimes it's a little more difficult to suggest new ways of working, quite little sort of set in their ways and how they do things. But within the AI sector, because it's so new, trying to get that safety by design built into it is a little easier. And that's been quite a refreshing way that we found that we're working with them. We're actively engaged with 8 companies. We've got 3 active interventions happening. So that's in 3 places where we're generating these warning messages as people are causing harm. And when they get these messages, they come through, the message does 2 things. It deters them from what they're doing, so it tells them to stop and that this is causing harm and that there are consequences, but it also offers a link to help. It tells them that support is available on our website, and we get click-throughs coming from those warning messages, and we have a huge amount of traffic every month. How am I doing? Am I all right for time? Okay, a couple of minutes. So what we found is that we are having to adapt our mission and the way that we work based on that user behaviour. It's the biggest growing threat that we see at the moment in the prevention of child sexual abuse, is the huge this increasing tide of child sexual abuse material and the corresponding behaviour from users. And just as a kind of anecdote of how this is sort of working hand in hand with these AI, with these LLMs. We had a call to our helpline this week from someone who had been arrested for his use of child sexual abuse material. And he'd been talking to Claude, the chatbot run by Anthropic. And he'd been talking to Claude about this arrest and about the use of his material. And Claude had said to him, "I'm not going to engage with you anymore on this discussion until you ring the Stop It Now helpline." So this is almost like this amazing sort of full circle that, okay, there's some bad behavior going on out there, but here's some AI doing some good. It's actually signposting us. It's telling these users, come and call the Stop It Now helpline and get the help that you need. And that's what he did. And that was a really gratifying moment to see that actually happening and that actual impact of the work that we're doing. I'm aware that I need to stop talking now. There's so much more I could say. I think in the questions afterwards, I'm really happy to talk about internally the work that we're doing as well, or take any questions on what I've talked about today. Thank you.
They're really powerful example there of how you are pivoting and responding to the world around us in AI. And next up, we hear from grant makers just regarding the impact of AI. I heard that grant makers are using AI grant writers are using AI to write proposals. Of those using AI, around 60% say they're using it to write applications that basically turn what were grant applications taking days into minutes. And so tell us a little bit more about the impact of that and what Sarah Watson is doing with her team to respond to AI. Sarah's from the head of innovation at the National Lottery Community Fund. So along with other funders, I'm sure we'd want to hear more about how you're dealing with those applications. Sarah.
Hello everyone. The first thing I have to do is apologise because I don't usually sound this gravelly. The really good news for all of you is it means I'm not going to talk for as long as I would normally talk. So, you know, cloud, silver lining. And I've also to thank you because I've had a really wonderful morning, really interesting conversations. It's a real privilege to be here. So I'm going to do a little bit about what we're doing internally, but also how we're reflecting on externally and what might be happening in the future. So AI sits within my innovation unit, and I have the absolute privilege of having a whole full-time member of staff that I can point at AI. So we've been able to advance quite quickly, which is brilliant. The first thing we looked at was how do we make this work internally? It's like, what do people need? And when we were talking about what do people need, we were talking about what do people need to be using AI safely? And that's been the key thing for us. How do we create the guardrails that our staff need to be able to be using this technology safely? So the first thing we did was we brought all of our senior leaders together, and they came up with a set of principles for the use of AI. So they cover things that from everything from how we approach it from an environmental perspective, how we always ensure there's a human at the wheel, all of those types of things. Anyone in the room, put your hand up if you have principles in your organisation. Okay, if you don't have your hand up, they're on our website. Steal them, adapt them, and make them yours. Out of those principles, we then also developed a staff use of AI policy. So this was the guardrails to make sure our staff were using it really carefully. I've given presentations on just this thing. The only thing I'm going to say, because short a period of time for this, is GDPR. It's like, if you're going to set up a policy, if you want your staff to be using AI, GDPR. I can't underline that or write that in big enough capitals. Those are the key things you need to make sure for your policy. How many people in the room have a policy for their staff? Brilliant. Oh, that's really positive. Again, online, steal them, make them yours. The final thing we did was go, okay, well, we think we know what we're doing now, but we sort of need to provide some guidance for people who are applying for applications around whether they can use AI or not. To be frank, we know using AI, if you're a volunteer putting a funding application together, you've barely got any time, and it makes it quicker for you. If English isn't your first language, it makes it so much easier for you. If you have a neurodivergence, actually it just makes things really simple. So why would we not say, yes, please use AI? What we do say is, don't get AI to write it for you. Get AI to help you write it. Because actually what we want to see is the story and nuance and joy that you will bring to the applications that you put together. You are the best storytellers of your story. So use it as support, use it as assistance, but don't just use it full stop. Internally, we've also been supporting our staff in different ways. So we have, I think we're our third tranche of volunteers who are trying out Copilot with a full license. We've discovered that the most useful thing for them is the writing of agents using Copilot, which sounds horribly technical, but essentially it just means getting them to write like a prompt into a permanent piece of AI that will enable the AI to continually do something. And the two most useful things that have come out of that is somebody set one up for text summarization. So it means now our funding officers, when they have to summarize a piece of a thing that they've written for a different committee, they can just press a button and AI will do it for them. They can read it and check it and make it okay. And we have also started trialing it out internally for transcriptions for meetings as well, to help our governance teams to be pulling together kind of accurate reflections of those meetings. But I also wanted to talk a little bit, hopefully still got time, about the kind of the future stuff that we're looking at as well. So Dan alluded to it a little bit there, and this is a space where I give you lots of questions without any answers, so I need to apologize for that, but you know, I'm in innovation, that's my job. One of the challenges that we're facing is all of you good folks that are writing funding applications and using AI. You're using AI to write funding applications. This means that we have had a massive increase in the amount of applications we're receiving because it's quicker and easier for people to do it. We only have a certain amount of staff that can assess those applications. So at some point, realistically, we're going to have more applications than we can assess. And then the obvious thing for us to do is go, oh, let's get AI in to help us assess the applications. So we're kind of journeying towards a space where over here, everybody's writing their applications with AI. And then over here, everyone's assessing their applications with AI. And so AI is just doing the whole thing, and surely that's not quite what we want. So if we're then working on that premise, does that mean we then have to say, maybe application forms are going to be obsolete in actually quite a short period of time? And so if you can't apply for money in an application form, what relationship do funders need with people that need funding to be able to make sure that funding and that resource is going to the best possible place? What might that look like? If you're not filling in an application form, how are you getting the money? If we're not receiving application forms, how are we giving it out? And going back to Dan's spheres, which I do refer to as Dan's egg, which he gets really upset about. But looking at that bigger sphere, the biggest one about that context change, it's like if you're working in an organization that's supporting people, you need to understand that context change, absolutely, because that will change how you deliver your service. But as a funder, we need to know how to best support you. So we need to know what that context change is, so we know how you're changing, so our support is right. So one of the things that we're looking at the moment is piloting a network of frontline community organisations that we resource to regularly capture the emerging threats, the emerging challenges, but also the emerging opportunities of AI in their community. Within that network, some people come in, help them make sense of what that means, and we can start going, okay, so this is what we think is going to be happening. This is how we think that you might be changing what you're doing in your organization to meet those needs. So we can tailor our funding reactively to what's happening, but doing it in a proactive way, so we're recognizing this is where you're going. We're also looking a little bit at some futures work, very quickly. But leaning more into that space. So one of the things we recognize as a challenge around AI is potential bias in the data sets they use. But when you look at us as a civil society sector, we've got loads of data that doesn't have that bias in it. So what if we work collectively to pull that data together and started having large language models that actually worked from our data, not the big corporates' data? What would that surface? How interesting would that be? If as funders, we've all got loads of information because you all give it to us all the time in your monitoring reports and your evaluation reports. How about as funders, if we started pulling all of that information together, that collective intelligence together, and then used AI to try and help us understand what all that meant? Imagine how amazing that would be. And then finally, one thing that we're looking at over the next year is how can we use AI to really revolutionize how we encourage participation in all elements of us as a funder's work. How do people participate in program design? How do they participate in helping us understand what's needed? How do they make the decisions? How can we use AI for us to merely be the vehicle and people be those that decide on the funding itself? So incredibly exciting times. And looking forward to some questions to see how we can pick that apart a little bit more.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sarah. Fantastic. I feel like that. You remember that bridesmaid moment where did you ever watch Bridesmaids, the film, when they were doing the karaoke? I feel like that when I was
a little bit worried where you're going with this, to be honest, because I've seen the film too.
But you need to stand up now, Sarah, because we need to make sure that people at the back can hear us. I'm going to give you the microphone in a minute. We really did. You had some brilliant things there about your kind of focus on external. Just coming to your internal focus with the organisation. I know out there, we are struggling with resources, we're struggling with time, making sure people feel safe in the operation. So how are you balancing experimentation with Gen AI against the realities, limited budgets, skills and time?
Thank you. Yes. Well, that's the $64 million question, isn't it? I think the first thing I'd say is not to get FOMO and to go slowly. I think in any organisation you've got a range of people, some who are the fast adopters and some who are naturally resistant, some who just won't want to partake in any use of AI for various reasons. And in our working group, we have developed a set of principles that we use as well, that we communicate regularly to staff. We have a monthly newsletter which goes out on innovation and AI and helps to try and keep pushing those messages so that, and it's a very quick read, this newsletter, so that there's no kind of, oh, I haven't got time to read it, oh, I didn't know about that. It's beautifully designed, it looks very nice, people open it up, they have a good read, and then they move on. It takes 5-10 minutes to read. And so every month they get that in their inbox, so they're constantly remembering, oh yeah, I do have that innovation hub with those tools on, I do have the AI SharePoint where I can go and find more links to training. But people can sort of dip in and out of it. Having said that, we also have a co-pilot trial, so we've got 8 members of staff who are undergoing a work with the full license co-pilot at the moment. And I think there's just a moment where you have to say, look, you are going to have to put a little bit of time and effort into understanding how to use this properly, how to create the best sort of prompts, because if you don't do that, then we'll only ever get so far with co-pilot, and sort of moving a little bit at a time, but embedding that knowledge gently within the organisation and not rushing anyone. But again, just reminding people that it's there. That's kind of how we're doing it.
Yeah, I think just briefly to say that a lot of people will say to me when they find out that we're doing some work around AI, it's like, oh, great, how should I use AI? And that's entirely the wrong question. The right question is, what are the problems or challenges and opportunities that I have? And which of these might AI be the solution for? Because it's not always going to be the best or most effective way of solving your problem. So never start from a, what can I use AI for space? Always start from what can I be doing better? What can I be doing more efficiently? Where's my problems? Where's my challenges? And then looking to see where it fits.
Brilliant. And building on that, we have a question here which has 14 likes.
Yikes.
It's a very, very, very popular question. I've seen a lot of talk about how to incorporate AI in organisations, but very little talk of ethical, environmental ramifications. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it is really challenging, and that's partly why we started off by going, okay, what are the principles by which we are going to guide our use of AI? I think in all of those spaces, it's a constant review for us. In our recent strategy, we also committed to being an environmentally regenerative funder, and there is an obvious tension between that commitment and us exploring AI. We're trying to understand what the implications are. We're trying to understand if there's particular bits of AI that we can use that are slightly more environmentally friendly than others. But at the moment, it's a really difficult circle for us to square. So, and this is not a space that we want to stay in, it's a space we want to move from. But at the moment, the best that we can do is say, okay, well, if you're going to use AI, make sure it's meaningful and make sure it's purposeful. Don't use it if you can pop your question in a search engine. Don't use it unless it's going to have a significant impact on the work that you're doing, unless it's going to add real value to what you're doing. Don't generate images with it, because that's way more environmentally costly than if you're prompting for text. So we try and create those kind of guardrails around it, and I think that's what we've done with all of those elements of the principle. I won't bore you with all of them, but all of those elements of the principles. It's like, make sure that there is always a human at the wheel. Never generate something that is AI-based and don't check it for accuracy. It lies to you because it's trying to be nice. So check it for accuracy, be accountable, be transparent about your use of it. So it's those principles that we've put together that are really that kind of guiding light for us around how we navigate this. But we haven't got it perfectly right at all. And I think it's a journey for us and a lot of other organisations as well.
Yeah, I'd say actually quite a similar situation with LFF. So we've actually in the last month just inserted a new principle around environmental considerations, thinking about how often we use it, using it mindfully, so not just going straight and defaulting straight to using AI, not deciding you need a picture and then asking both Gemini and Copilot and ChatGPT to all generate the same picture and then choose the best one, like understanding and then communicating to staff why this is a bad idea, what the environmental impact is on that. And we know that our staff are really engaged about the environmental impact, because the article that we have on our AI SharePoint that is about the environmental impact of AI has got way more interaction and clicks than any other article that we've got on our SharePoint. So people are concerned. And so the idea of just enough internet, the idea of being mindful, the idea of being just careful and not just defaulting to it all the time, that's something that we're trying to embed that message again and again. And also, again, acknowledging and appreciating the fact that not every member of staff is going to want to be dragged along this AI journey, and that for some staff members, there is a huge benefit and a huge value in having an AI assistant, and for some, it's just not something that they're ever going to be comfortable with, and just acknowledging that and not sort of forcing that journey, which in turn has a better impact on the environment. So I would say that's our approach.
This next one is for you, Sarah, and it's about how can AI help with understanding our impact?
Well, that's a really good question. So I'm thinking about the way that I use AI and the way that we can potentially use it collectively. So I think it's, when you're trying to understand your own impact, it's a really brilliant tool for you to be asking questions of, but it's actually also a really brilliant tool to ask you questions, so it can be that real critical friend for you. I think we always think of it as like, it's a source of knowledge and information, so I'm going to ask stuff. But actually, it's also a really brilliant, critical coach. So you can ask it to critique something. You can ask it what you're missing. What have I not thought of when I'm working in this context? Just get really good at doing your prompts. But when we're thinking about it and thinking about it more collectively, we're starting to ask questions around, how do we best understand the impact of a funding program? And that funding program's impact is essentially made up of the impact of all the brilliant organizations that we support to work within that program. So how can we better collectively look at what kind of impact we want to achieve? So instead of saying to you, well, actually, you've been awarded a grant, we'd like you to measure this stuff. So actually, all of you have been awarded grants in this space. How do we collectively work together to understand what we value and what are we trying to change? And let's understand how we can then measure what the things are that we value. But as soon as we start talking about measuring in that value space, it can be quite complicated and quite complex. So this is an opportunity to use AI to help us understand what we can measure, to help us work out whether we've increased the value that collectively we think is important. But we can also use AI to help us with the data. Once we've worked out what it is we want to measure, can help us with the data for us to understand whether we are shifting the dial in the place that we want to go. So we're trying to think about it like, how will we use it individually or within our organization, but also how it might impact on understanding impact frameworks collectively as well.
Brilliant. We're going to give a bit of audience participation now. Not that all the team are looking at me as if to say, what are you doing? This question is, do you sometimes need to switch off all the tech just for a while and simply be? Any tips for managing the overwhelm that can come from rapid innovation? So what I'd like to hear is from you, what are the tips for just kind of setting down tech for a little while and that help you just overcome that overwhelm from rapid innovation? So have a think about that. I'm just going to very quickly come back to you. If anybody's going to put their hand up and let me know, I'm going to come to you. Paddy, I've always wanted to do this.
Just go for a walk, but without any headphones.
Not listening to any podcasts?
Let your brain do whatever it does. Just go for 45 minutes and it'll do nothing, or it'll be full of stuff for 10, 20 minutes, and then settle down, and then it'll start to think about different stuff. But including the headphones, even if it's just music, just put everything away.
How often?
Once or twice a week.
Any more? Yes.
Put your phone on flight mode when you go to sleep. It'll do wonders for your dreams. People start dreaming again when their phone's on flight mode and not having the Wi-Fi transmitting through near the bed.
Is that a real thing?
Yeah. It's a real thing. Check it out on ChatGPT.
I'm going to do that. It's amazing. Have we got... Oh, right, I'm going to come to you. Where was that? At the front. Where was that? Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Try to draw what it is that you're thinking about or trying to communicate. Not necessarily artistically, but connect concepts just with a pencil and paper. Sometimes if you go straight to ChatGPT or something and ask it to help you structure it, you miss the critical bit where you're trying to make sense of it in your own brain. But if you try to draw it, you force yourself to look for the connections and the relationships.
And how did you get to that point? How did you get to that thinking?
I work with someone who always says, help me join the dots. And it made me stop and think, how do I explain this thing? How do I see the relationships and the connections? And I realised it helped me to draw it. So now that's what I always do.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. Thank you very, very much. Any more for any more? Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, yes. Hello. It's lovely.
We have a monthly engagement and collaboration day where colleagues come together because we're quite remote and hybrid working is a principle of ours. And we did one last week and one of my colleagues said to me, I didn't get my laptop out once. And I was like, well, why don't we do that from next year, that on our engagement and collaboration days, just don't bring your laptop because you're there to chat and to engage with each other.
There you go. Fantastic. Any more? One more? No, no, yes, 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 yes. Hello. Hello. How are you, Siobhan?
So in my team, we play a lot of games, and I think play is underestimated. Getting us back to ourselves. Yeah, so just play. Yeah.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for that. I really appreciated that. I just walked the dog, Louis, and he loves it. So I think we're literally got a couple of minutes for, I will just check if we've got any more questions, but if you had one piece of advice for us as a group here today around AI from your perspective, both as in your role, Sarah, and also as a funder, what would that be?
Yeah, I think the one piece of advice kind of speaks a little to what I've been talking about already. It's like absolutely use it because it can be a brilliant critical friend. It can really speed up your thought processes and what you're trying to get to. But it's never going to be as good as you because you understand your context, you understand your story, you understand the people that you work with. You feel every moment of what you're trying to do. You know, the passion in this sector is what keeps us all in this sector. So absolutely use it because it will help and support you. But remember that, you know, you're the one that knows this stuff. So use it as a piece of advice rather than something that you then rely on. Yeah.
So I think this would be for the funders and grant makers in the room, really. So one of the reasons we have been able to respond really quickly to the behaviour of others around AI is the type of funding that we have. So my project, Project Intercept, is funded by Nominet from the Countering Online Harms Innovation Fund, and it's quite an experimental piece of funding. There's no KPIs attached. It allows us to be really agile and to sort of pivot and decide, okay, that's not working. We're gonna change direction completely and do this, and there's no kind of penalty attached to that. And that quite innovative piece of funding has been hugely helpful over the course of the 3-year project. To just be able to respond really quickly in situations. So I'd say more funding of that kind would be a really good thing.
And one last question. You talked about being able to access some of your policies and use them for our own. Where is a good place for organisations to learn more about AI, upskill their staff, and talk about governance and usage? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, and please do tell him that I've said this because then he'll owe me a drink. But Dan, who isn't with us today, CAST provides some brilliant networks that we're part of as a funder, but actually, you know, is broadly open. So he runs an online peer group, which I think has something crazy like 300-400 different organisations that are involved in, where essentially everybody comes along and just shares what they're doing. Goes, look, I'm trying this and it's not worked, and somebody else will be like, oh well, I tried it and this has. So it's an incredibly useful network. He and Zoe Amar also have set up the Charity AI Task Force, and there's some really interesting kind of resources coming out of that as well. So those would be my first 2 shouts. Is there's a brilliant network to get involved in where there's loads of examples of what people are doing that you can just steal, and stealing is always the best approach. But actually also from a more policy perspective, the task force has got some really good resources there as well.
Brilliant stuff.
Can I have one? DataKind UK, proud trustee. Lots of stuff on their website, webinars.
DataKind. So literally is a website? Yep. Brilliant stuff. Sarah and Sarah, big thank you. Thank you very much. Great session.